Marley at the History Bards Podcast. Today we have the great privilege of welcoming Kendy Pearson to the show today. And Kendy is a Christian historical fiction author, and her debut novel came out in 2016. And she has got a really fascinating life because I was reading her bio, and she has lots of little keywords in there like big families, country life, fireplaces, things that we all love. But we really, really want to know more about you and your book. So can you get started by telling our listeners a little bit about you and about why you are started writing in this genre?
Well, I started writing 10 years ago when I retired from teaching high school. And I'm like, well, what do I do with my life now? And I was so into reading this genre, historical fiction. And I really like fiction that's clean,
Yes.
with a spiritual thread or an inspirational thread, at least, that kind of thing. And so I just read and read and read. And then I thought, wow, I wonder if I could write this stuff. Maybe this is a second career. And
Yeah.
I just started thinking, because I wasn't ready to be put out to pasture yet. Right. And so I just thought, I'm going to take a stab at this. And I thought, well, this is big. Writing a novel is huge.
Yes.
And so what I did was my grandchildren were little toddlers at that time. And so I just loved reading books to them. Oh, I loved it. And I thought, I'm going to write picture books and board books. And I did.
Wow.
I wrote several of them. And then I also, during this time, I was freelancing. I did a tremendous amount of freelancing, 200 articles in a year and a half. And just a lot, just to get the hang of it, the industry and how to do that. And I joined some writers groups and a critique group. And I wrote the picture books. And then I wrote my first novel, and I immediately got an agent. I pitched the book. I immediately got an agent. In fact, I had
wonderful.
2 agents that were saying, I want you. And I'm like, well, I better go to the first one first. And, anyway, so I was with an agent for 5 years, and she said, just keep writing. And I did. I wrote 3 more novels. And so at that time, I completed the first 3 books of my Civil War series, and another book of a completely different topic, which is a whole different historical topic, but still United States, 1880s, West Coast. And anyway, I didn't have much luck with the agency. Things were changing in the publishing world a lot. They have changed so much in the last 10 years. Yeah, it's just amazing. In fact, I recently discovered that some of the friends that I made that were with the bigger publishers, they're going indie now, because things have changed so much. And my agent always said, once somebody knows about you, you won't have trouble selling your books if you do go indie, that kind of thing. Anyway, I made it to a few pub houses, a few editorial reviews, and oh so close. It's like the school of oh so close, many, many times with both my children's books and my novels. And I finally thought, enough of this. I'm 10 years older than when I started. And I'm just, I just felt like I needed to do it. And the novel came about because I was a history teacher in high school, and it was one of the several subjects that I taught. But I homeschooled 4 boys actually, for a couple years, and we got really into the Civil War stuff when they were in middle grade, right? And then I ended up teaching it in high school to high school students. And I always asked myself, oh my goodness, what would it be like to live in that time? What would it be like to have your son go off to war and be fighting your neighbor? There are things, my 2 sons have been overseas in battle zones in Iraq and Afghanistan. So my mama's heart was just like, oh, what would this be like? And then to have your husband go on and neighbor against neighbor. And I thought, well, I'm going to start researching. I researched for several months. And I know that as a writer, you have to find out what hasn't been done. That's the key, right? Because you can write a dozen stories that sound very similar. They're just plopped in different settings. I thought, well, I discovered that the 2 most contested pieces of real estate during that time, when the United States was breaking apart, was the 2 were Missouri and West Virginia. Well, in my research, I saw there's been quite a bit written about Missouri, about how it broke apart, but not West Virginia. Wow. And it wasn't even West Virginia then. It became West Virginia halfway through the war. It was all Virginia.
Yeah.
And so I found it absolutely intriguing because, the mountains that divide Virginia, they divided two cultures. We've
Yes.
got the big plantation, slave holding, very staunch Confederacy, and then we've got the farmers, the common little man, and they were much more leaning, but it was all mixed. It was all mixed. There was a tremendous rebellion. What did I say? I could say it's a hotbed of rebellion, tensions, and mixed allegiances. That's what I found it to be. And I thought, this is it. I need to do this. And that's how the series came about.
Well, that's what I was fixing to ask you, because, lots of times whenever we're doing research and we're really delving into these histories and everything, that we start finding like little nuggets of obscure history. And so you obviously
yes.
found that about West Virginia, and something that I didn't
Oh
even
my.
know. Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually, one of the write your novel books I read said, take all the juicy nuggets that you got and throw them into one book. And I'm like, but then I won't have anything for other books. But I did that. I threw it
Wow.
all into one book. That's why
Okay.
almost every tiny thing in the back of my book, there's an extensive author notes. And almost everything in there is modeled after something. It's inspired by something that really, really happened.
Oh, well,
And
share something with us. Share, if you can share a little bit with us.
well, let me see. There, like I said, I kind of got carried away and wrote a pretty extensive, author notes.
Yeah.
Because I actually talked about the battles, and I talked about the battles, and I talked about the specifically what happened in the battles that I imitated or didn't imitate, that kind of thing, which was a lot. I thought I had my notes here to make it easy, and I knew this would happen. So,
okay.
Off the top of my head, basically, there are several things that happened in my book, and I didn't want people to think, oh, she pulled that out of a hat. Not at all. For example, I don't want to give away too much of the book.
No, don't give away too much.
Yeah. So, number one, this family. Do you remember the old movie Shenandoah? Does anybody ever, with Jimmy Stewart? But
yes.
It was a family that was torn, very similar, and they only lived a few hours from where my story takes place.
Okay.
But it's just that it's I didn't want to do that again, where the same family had mixed allegiances, but I wanted to show how their friends and loved ones and neighbors were acting and how things were going. So for example, I have them go into their little church, their little Methodist church in the country. And because everything was so split, a lot of their neighbors were leaning towards Confederacy, a lot of them.
Yes.
The preacher gets up and he preaches a fiery sermon. I took that from an actual sermon preached by a Confederate-leaning preacher, because almost the same thing was being said from both sides at the pulpit.
Yes.
And I thought, well, this is fascinating. So that's definitely one thing that I pulled from there. I didn't just pull that out of my hat. I kind of paraphrased some things and was influenced very much by that. Like, how on earth do they look at this?
Oh,
so that's the way I looked at it.
That's really, really neat. So that's really good thing for listeners to know about your books, about these little nuggets of history that is really fascinating about that history.
Yeah.
So let me ask you that. You talked a little bit earlier about joining writers groups and things. So as a writer, how do you feel like that helped you as a writer in joining writers groups and having like a support system like that?
Oh, it was tremendous. It was tremendous. In my acknowledgments, I thank my group that I've been with for 10 years. And then I became the leader of that group. And then I also started a couple other critique groups for a period of time, just because the teacher in me loves to teach.
Yes.
And I also branched out and I teach workshops all over my state to libraries about writing, and I put together a bunch of workshops. So that's been wonderful. But the encouragement and the critique, I mean, for anybody who wants to dabble in writing, don't go it alone. Don't go it alone. I suggest you get involved with some kind of a regional writers group where there are people that write your genre, and where you can go to their conferences and you can get excellent teaching. A lot of times when you join these groups, you not only find critique partners, which basically is is let me pick your brain and here kind of edit my work for free, because it's give and take and you're sharing among each other.
Yes.
But not only that, but you have all these valuable things at your disposal for learning, including free things for members, like free, one of my groups I belong to, we do a free Zoom meeting every month where they get a big name person to come and we sit and have a Zoom meeting and we learn all kinds of wonderful stuff.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's really,
So,
that's
yeah.
it's really valuable. I really recommend that too, because early on, whenever I was starting too, and I joined a writers group at Barnes and Noble that we were meeting every month, and there's just something about getting that feedback, and I know,
Yes.
like you said, it's really valuable because it helps teach you, and because people see things in ways that you may not have even thought of.
Do they ever? Do
Yeah.
they ever? I had one book. It was actually, I don't remember which book it was, but I had said something in there that I felt was perfectly, according to my upbringing, was perfectly normal to say. And I'm like, there are things that you have to say in historicals. If you want to be authentic, they're
Yes.
not going to be politically correct, right?
Right.
But my author friend, who I dearly love, she said, I think a lot of people might find that offensive that come from this background. And I'm like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because the worst thing for an author is to have somebody pick up their book and then label them some awful way and write a bad review or something and misunderstand their intentions or the authenticity of what they're trying to present.
Yeah.
I'm all about authenticity. Historical fiction, as you know, it's just, I don't, like I said, some people write any story like a love story, and you can plunk it into any setting. You can do Ireland 1830. You can do San Francisco 1880. You can just plunk it. And I don't do that. I try to make the reader live in the era that they're reading and in the environment and the setting that they're reading in. So if people got a mountain dialect, they're going to read words they have never heard.
I'm really
the
glad
area
that
that I'm writing about.
I'm really glad that you said that, because like historical, there's like this big, huge debate about that, about historical fiction and the accuracy, and how I even saw this just actually today. Somebody was asking a question on Facebook about, how close do you need to be, and it really has something to do with they're trying to fit it into their story instead of fitting their story into the history, and that's so, that's a big controversy. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you feel about that, about the accuracy?
I think that you have to have a caveat. That I noticed that in the in the copyright page, usually for historical fiction, it will say, and I can't quote it exactly, maybe you can, I didn't print that right out for my notes, but it basically says that this is inspired by true events, but it is, all the characters are fictionalized. They're still fictionally portrayed and everything. I have an author friend who's written just a lot of good historical books, and she's very famous. And I sat in on a workshop, and I took the opportunity to say, how can you talk about real people without getting sued for libel or slander or something,
Yes.
And basically what she told me is, well, for one thing, if they're dead, and anybody can say anything they want to about it, something like that. And then she said, I said, well, what about family members? And she said, well, I have contacted family members on occasion to let them know and have them read it and see if they're okay with it.
Wow.
But she said the best thing you could do is just either quote them directly. So what you are writing is on historical record, which I did, and in a few different instances from a president or a newspaper article that I pulled up, or you give them a different name, because that's the caveat. You could say everything is inspired by real events. Yeah, and that's why I have the extensive author notes to say, but these things really happened this way, and this person, Colonel Lytle, really did fall off of his horse and his horse dropped dead, and just silly things like that.
I mean, I think that's excellent advice, because I know that's something that, even like newer authors that are just starting out, that's a dilemma that they go through, trying to figure out, well, what if somebody, I don't want to get sued. So I think what you said about that is an excellent, excellent advice.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and moving forward with your story and everything, so can you tell our listeners a little bit about what's going on with your novel?
Okay. You mean with the storyline, the story
Yeah, the
arc?
storyline first, and then maybe
Okay.
what's coming when it's coming out and things like that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, as far as the storyline, it basically starts introducing you to a typical farm family in a small, tiny, out in the country farm in West Virginia. I mean, Western Virginia, and it's a 20-year-old sister, second to the oldest of five kids, and she's trying to hold everything together because her dad's dying and her mom died a few years ago. And her brother's working hard as he can, has a leather business anyway, just really good folk, right? And but they're still trying to pay off having their mom in the sanatorium, having died for a long time. And these are things you find out, in the first chapter too.
Yeah.
So we've got that, and then we've got this doctor who's kind of embittered, that lives in Charleston, not too far away. And he basically was raised on a plantation in King William County in Virginia. And his parents owned 100 slaves. And the life that he lived growing up, he had, and I don't want to give away too much, but he had
Right.
a really great, close relationship with a slave. And there were things that happened that caused him to want to get out of that, get away from that lifestyle.
Wow.
And so he became a doctor, and he's a doctor in Charleston with a small practice. And his heart is for the opposite of what he grew up. His heart is,
Oh.
he goes to the poor farm all the time. He takes care of the downtrodden. He kind of doesn't like taking care of the upper crust, but he does it because it's part and parcel to his lot in the city as a physician. And there's a lot of pressure put on him to join the Confederacy, and even in an elite group, to join with all the other doctors and lawyers, the elite group. And what's interesting is the person that heads that up is the great grandpa of General Patton from World War II.
Oh, how about
And
that?
so he's a real character. I got to grab a lot of real stuff from him. And anyway, so my doctor is basically, he's like, how can I? So his dilemma is, I believe Virginia has a right to be sovereign. I believe Virginia could pull away if they want. They joined the Union on their own accord, and doggone it, they can pull away from it on their own accord. And we're not going to bow to a union that we put there, that we put in power. That kind of attitude, which is very common, right? States' rights. But he could not abide slavery. So it caused him to make this decision. And so his story goes forward, and obviously he interacts with Augusta, is the main female role. And so what we see is their interaction, which is a lot of headbutting. He eventually winds up opening up a hospital because he's joined the Union Army, the Federalists, and he starts a hospital at their farm, in their barn, because that's what they used to do. They would commandeer barns when they were right in the middle of the war zone. And so it goes on from there. Both of them have all kinds of struggles and different things happening, and misunderstandings and hardship, lots of hardship. There's a lot of death in my book because there was a lot of death back then. And every death in my book is fashioned after something I read about. It's just really hard because, especially towards the beginning, well, all through the war, in West Virginia, and Western Virginia in particular, there was a tremendous presence of bushwhackers and the irregulars, the people that would just go out and kind of do their own thing. They were like a helter-skelter group calling themselves Confederates, and they'd go out and do stuff with their own brand of justice, kind of, so to speak. And it was a dangerous time, very, very dangerous time.
Very was. So how do you feel like that your experience being a teacher and in life and everything, how do you feel like that this influenced your decision to write about this era?
Oh, greatly, because I actually had to learn the skills to make it more interesting. I know how to make things interesting for teenagers when I stand in the front of a classroom or with a PowerPoint, but to make it interesting enough to make a story that is entertaining and people want to read, that was very fun. And I had to kind of pull the reins a bit on myself to not teach too much. But you know what I found? The real true historical fiction fan loves to learn. They love
Yes.
to learn. Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Oh, really? And they don't balk at what does that word mean? I've
Yes.
never heard that word. They don't have a problem with that. You get somebody who reads contemporary and they try to read a historical because maybe they know the author, they
Uh-huh.
can't get into it. They're
No,
just
no.
like, wait, there's just so much going on, and what happened? And what's that word? And just
Yeah.
so it's a world of its
It
own. I
really
feel like
is. Historical fiction
yeah,
fans, readers, and authors. We're kind of all in our own little unique
yeah.
little bubble here about how we feel about. Because I am definitely one of those that loves to learn about these different eras whenever I'm
Mhm.
reading a book and little tidbits of history that you never knew. So I'm definitely in that category. So tell us
Yeah.
about when this is when it, I know you told me offline when it's coming out and everything,
Yeah.
but tell our listeners about the release date for this.
Okay. Well, the ebook is out right now. Every place. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. Technically, it is out the 5th
Okay.
of April. We're in April, so it's already out, and the 9th should be the launch of the paperback book.
Okay.
So that's when. Right now, I'm a little slow with Ingram, but it'll definitely be on Amazon.
Okay.
So I'm looking
Are you
forward to
gonna?
that. And I was going to say book 2 will be out in the fall.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And
Great.
that follows one of the other children in the family, the oldest boy. That follows him launching in to be in an elite force for the Union. And book 3 is about son number 2,
Oh, wow.
and that was very dear to my heart.
Mhm.
It's coming out in the
Okay.
winter of 2025.
Well, definitely be sure and tell us about those things so whenever it comes out that we can make sure our listeners and our subscribers know about those releases.
Good, I will
And what
do
and
that because I'm
title?
excited.
What's the title of your book?
The title of the first book, the one that's out now, is When the Mountains Wept.
Okay. Oh, great
And
name. Great name.
yeah, and it's actually part of the whole series, which when it's done, I believe if I write the prequel, it'll be a 6-book series.
Oh,
So,
that's great. That's
and
exciting.
basically each one, the first 3 books take place during the Civil War, right up till the end of the war. And then the books that come after that will be following each of the children in the Dabney family.
Okay.
Book 2 that's coming out in the it's coming out in October, I think. Yes, that's called When Heaven Thunders.
You've got
And
great
book
titles.
3, well, book 3 is In Tempest Winds, and well, I'll tell you that the series is called West Virginia, Born of Rebellion's Storm.
Mhm.
And because as I was reading, I came across several times that West Virginia is considered a nation born, or excuse me, a state born of a country torn.
Oh,
So, and then I kind of went with that, and I'm like, it was really a child of the storm.
yeah.
So that was my original name of the series, is Child of the Storm. But there's another whole book or series out there that's fantasy with that name. So
Okay.
anyway, you got to be careful. Authors don't always get what they want, as far as
No, that's
titles and,
true.
and so forth. Yeah,
That's
not if
very
you want
true.
the book to be found and people to know what kind of genre it is. But yeah, it really is. It's a storm. It's a tremendous tempest, and
Yes.
and yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's the kind of book I love to read. And I have really popular historical author friends who've given me wonderful endorsements,
Oh,
and I'm
that's great.
very humbled.
Yeah. So, you've told us when it's going to be out. So, can you tell our listeners where they can find it? Maybe your website.
Yeah, they can always go to my website to find out what's going on. I've
And what
been in
is
the
that?
throes
Can
of
you?
some things. Just kendypearson.com, my
And
name.
we'll make sure and post that on the screen so everybody will know
Okay, thank
where to
you.
go.
Thank you. Yeah. In fact, there's still an offer up. They can get the first 3 chapters for free if they want to.
Yes, I was going to actually point that out because I did notice that on your website that people can go there and get some of the
Mhm.
chapters and read those ahead of time. I think that is a wonderful
Yeah.
opportunity to kind of people to get a flavor of how you write and
Mhm.
to build up that readership so that whenever it does come out, well, they just have to go out and get it.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I've had really good comments about it. I One of my things is this book is completely appropriate for men and women.
Okay.
I'm a little bit concerned that a man might read the first 3 chapters and think it's women's fiction or something like that. It is not. It is not. In fact, one of my beta readers says, "Oh my goodness, this specific scene was so vivid and graphic that I had a nightmare about it."
Oh my goodness!
Well,
Wow.
I didn't intend that, but it is
No.
realistic,
Yeah.
So
Well, that's good to know. That's good to know for the listeners out there. And again, realistic historical fiction like that is timeless. It's something that again can teach. And so we really appreciate you sharing all of this with us, and we really do appreciate you being on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun,
Yeah,
and I just hope that you continue to have authors talking and doing what you're doing. It's just
we
great.
will. We definitely will. And to all of our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on the show today. Don't forget to click the subscribe button. This is Dee Marley at the History Bards Podcast. Thank you again to Kendy Pearson, and don't forget to go to her website to check out the release of her new book. And as always, keep making history and keep listening.